to pop up like this. And when you see that, you'll know that that has something to do with the analysis of this story. So Jane woke up one morning. It was winter, it was cold. She struggled to get out of bed, and as normal, she walked into her kitchen and she made herself a cup of coffee. But she just had this sense of dread creeping over her, and she couldn't explain exactly what it was, but it was really in the air around her. So after about half an hour, she thought, I can't do this anymore. So she packed up her stuff and she went to her local coffee shop where she normally used to go and sit and write scripts and be creative and do all the things that she needed to do. And she had a cup of coffee, but she just couldn't shake what was going on. So she thought, well, this isn't working. Maybe I'll go home and not do anything to do with my little business venture today and just try and do something more relaxing. So when she got home, she got out of the car, and as she was walking up the stairs, she just had this feeling of dread creeping over the top of her. Like she could hardly breathe, and she started to panic. What was going on for Jane? Let's go have a look at her story. To understand what's going on for Jane, we kind of have to look at what's going on with her business in the last few days and maybe the last few months. Why has she suddenly gone from really passionate about it to absolutely terrified to get started? She had been developing this idea, she'd been throwing all her creativeness into it, she'd been writing scripts, she'd been learning how to film, she'd been learning how to speak on camera and trying to hone what she was doing. So what happened for her last week was that she put a post up on one of her social media groups and it said, it's coming. And she gave a deadline of on Monday, which automatically set this immovable deadline in her head that she felt she had to meet no matter what. So she added a whole heap of pressure into the mix when there really wasn't some pressure in the mix. But is that enough to cause this sort of terrifying response? To understand Jane a bit better, we're actually going to have a look at her work history and see if there's any clues back there as to why she's now feeling like she's terrified of starting this new business. So we'll jump back to her first full-time position, which was back in the early 2000s. She was doing a contract and she was offered a job. So she didn't really choose this job, but she got into it. She had a great deal of fun. She learned heaps about what was going on. She started to do her law degree and she stayed with that job for about 8 years. Towards the end of that job though, she started to get demotivated about what she was doing. She couldn't get engaged with what she was doing. And to be honest, she started to get really bored. Things had slightly changed and she thought, well, now is the time to go off and try something different. She got offered another job, which she took. It wasn't really a job for her though. It was exactly the same type of thing as what she'd done before. The group of people that she was were not welcoming, didn't make her part of the team, and she felt very isolated in that job. But she did hang around for 4 years in that role. So she was offered another job, and it was a job that was completely different. So she was learning a whole set of new skills. She was having a great time. It was a very dynamic and fast-paced environment, and she really, really loved it. She embraced it. She was having the best time. About 6 years into that role, upper management had made a few changes, and these were having a negative impact on her team. So she thought, maybe it's time for me to get a new change. I'm not really embracing this new way of what's happening. So she thought, yep, this is it. I'm gonna move on. So she left that role and she thought, right, now is the time when I've got a whole lot of skills and experience behind me, and she'll look at developing her own business because that's something that she wanted to do and something that she's wanted to do since she was 20. So she went down the path of creating different business plans, investigating different business options, and she was really embracing this idea of having a business of her own, and she'd all got a couple of them all the way through to having a website ready to launch. Then off chance, she had a coffee with a friend one day and a friend said, oh, I need someone. And she went, oh, okay, maybe I'll try that. That sounds exciting. So she went off and did another job, leaving her business plans behind. She started this new job and it was very different. It was an industry she'd never worked in before, but it kind of had connections to skills that she'd done things in the past. So she was kind of embracing a bit of the old world and the new world, and she started to get really invested in what she was doing. Until again, she got to that point where it wasn't as fun as she thought. She'd learned lots of stuff, she'd enjoyed her time there, but it really wasn't for her. So she left that job, and that's when she said, now is the time when I have to start this business. I'm coming up to 50, so I really need to say, this is now. Now is the time I'm going to start this business. So she threw herself into this one business idea that was something that she'd always wanted to do, but never had the courage to do it. She threw herself into speaking classes. She joined an improv crew. She started to break out of that, I've got to sit in the background cycle. So why is she so scared to start? So let's have some analysis on her story. So let's now do a little bit of analysis about what's actually going on for Jane. We know that there's a lot of passion in what she's doing. So we know she's got fear. We know that she's developing self-doubt. We know that over her career she's built up a lot of skills. We assume that this is all being driven by a fear of failure. We know that when we look at the things that she's done in her career, that she didn't choose the jobs that she was doing. She was just offered the opportunity. We know from her story that the majority of the jobs that she's done seems to have started up good, but then they've turned a bit bad. And we know with most of these jobs that she just lost motivation. And a lot of the jobs that she left was because she no longer felt that they had a challenge to them. We know that she's come up with a lot of different business ideas over her past. So it's really easy with these kind of things to jump straight to the fact that fear is going to be because of failure, which is not the case here because none of her background shows that there's a history for her of failing. We can also say that her self-doubt isn't being driven because she doesn't feel like she has a lack of skills, because she's built up skills in all of her other jobs and she has started to do things for this particular business that will help her build the skills that she needs. So now, to understand what is actually going on, we're going to have a look at the patterns that we can see in her work history, so that we can see that she has had all these jobs that have started good, then gone bad. She's lost the motivation, she's lost the challenge, and she's had a heap of business ideas which she's taken all the way to a certain point. We can also say that business ideas that she's taken all the way to the point aren't failures. They're just because she didn't try anything with them. She just got them to a certain point. So it was just an idea creation type process. So what is driving her actual fears now? One of the things that becomes immediately obvious is the fact that she has a great deal of passion for this job, or for creating her own job. She didn't necessarily have the same kind of passion in her old jobs because they all went through this cycle of starting good, going bad, losing her motivation, and then losing the challenge. So could it be that her fear is actually about what if she starts this business venture and it becomes a bit successful and it goes through that same process of it starts out good and fun, she then loses a bit of motivation towards it, and then it loses the challenge, driving this main fear. Again, with the self-doubt, maybe she's actually worried that the pattern that's being created is actually that this is going to happen again. But instead of happening for somebody else, it's going to be happening in her own business. So what does Jane need to do to actually turn around her thinking on this so that she doesn't not start because she's worried about this happening? Once you actually identify patterns and realize what's driving the pattern, it's much easier to move it away and get it out of your head. So for Jane, simply journaling about what she's going to do if it starts to lose challenge and motivation, is actually going to help her get over the fear that she had and be able to move on. Thank you for being with me here today. This is the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed. This is the first time that I've done one of these videos, so it has been quite nerve-wracking for me to film and edit and put it all together, but it also has been a lot of fun. If you'd like to get a weekly email with just a little summary of the story and the types of analysis we did, there's a link in the box below to subscribe to the newsletter. And thank you so much for being with me here today. If you want to see more stories with Jane, don't forget to click the subscribe button above and you'll get notified every time one comes out. Thank you so much.